Welcome to Ethos Effect.
Welcome to the Ethos Effect podcast. After building and learning from failures,
We discovered our ethos and leveraged it
to scale, sell, and build again our seven-figure businesses.
whether you're starting out or leveling up.
This podcast is your source for innovation and lasting impact. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Ethos Effect podcast. You have your hosts, Chelsea and Donovan Rikus. Today, we're super excited about these guests. We've got JLD and Kate Erickson with Entrepreneurs on Fire. So guys, if you don't know this podcast, I don't know where you've been. You've been living under a rock, obviously, because this is the business podcast. So guys, thanks for being here. We're so happy to have you.
Fired up. Let's go.
Let's go, Fire
thanks
Nation.
for having us.
I was going to make a joke and do like the boom, shake the room.
Oh,
but
I was going to ask John to do it. He starts his podcast with so much energy and I love it. Like, I can't tell you how often that sticks in my head. Your little show intro. Would you give everybody a sneak peek if they haven't heard?
Boom. Shake the room, Fire Nation. Let's go.
Woo! Live coming from JLD. All right, that was perfect. I absolutely loved it. So for those of you that are not watching us on YouTube, we do have another little guest with us today. Do we want to introduce him?
Yes, this is Bo Arthur Dumas right here. This is actually his first appearance.
Oh,
Yes.
wow. Hey, buddy.
Wow. That's big, actually.
That's
You know, that's
huge.
the thing that if Bo Arthur Dumas, which initials are bad, obviously, he does big things in this world, which of course we all expect him to do, then they'll be pulling this from the archives, period.
For sure.
We're going down in history in this moment. Is what
Yeah,
I'm going to say.
100%.
So how old is Bo now?
3 months.
3 months.
Oh, that is amazing. So Kate and John, you guys run your business together. Obviously, Donovan and I do the same thing. So we have a soft spot in our hearts for the couple entrepreneurial journey. And I'd love to kind of hear from both of you how you got started in the podcasting realm and how that kind of fused together, what that looked like.
Yeah, I'll let Kate kick it off.
Yeah, so I got started in the podcasting space by receiving an email from John. I was at my 9-to-5 job. I was working in advertising and marketing. Actually, it was like more like a 9 a.m. to midnight job, but that's neither here nor there. And I got an email from John saying, hey, I'm thinking about leaving my commercial real estate job because I have this idea to start a podcast. Let's talk about it tonight over dinner. And I was like, whoa, totally out of left field. I wasn't super familiar with podcasting, like, period. And John was really fired up about this idea he had. So we sat down over dinner. He told me more about his idea to start the podcast. And I was like, okay, you should definitely do it. You're very fired up about this, pun intended. And I was like, ready and all on board to fully support that venture. And for like the next 6 to 8 months, he was up we were living in a 1-bedroom kind of like loft in Portland, Maine at the time. And John would wake up at like 5 a.m. and until like 9 p.m., he would be up in the loft with a microphone on his computer, just like glued to it. And I was just like, what is he doing up there? And he was building what you now see as Entrepreneurs on Fire.
Wow. I know that was a big deal for you when you first started in business.
Yeah, of course. I believe you were the first daily business podcast, John, right?
I was the first daily business podcast interviewing entrepreneurs, which I think it's important to qualify that because that's one of the things I talk about even to this day in 2024 when we're talking here is the importance of finding a powerful niche within a niche within a niche that you can dominate. And that's how far down the road I had to go to say, I don't want to be that 9th best podcast interviewing entrepreneurs once a week because there were 8 other shows doing that. How do I become the best day one? And that was going down another niche, which was the quantity aspect and saying, I'm going to be the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. That makes me the best, the worst, the only. Like that's what is amazing. And Bo, he's already off. He's already upset at his dad for hogging the microphone. I'm sorry, buddy.
We
You
love
gotta
you,
relax.
Bo.
Bo.
Come back.
And so that is what I like to say. With Entrepreneurs on Fire, the day that I launched, I was the best daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs.
There you
I
go.
was the worst daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. I was the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. And that is why I was able to carve a niche and carve a little bit of momentum, because of that single fact that I went into a void that nobody else is playing. I went to a playground that the sandbox was empty.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have the podcast still. You're an author. I've read your book, and you also have made, I guess, some products like the journal. Can you tell us a little bit about how the other things developed, how the podcast kind of continued and grew you into these other businesses?
So back in 2012, when Kate was referencing the start of Entrepreneurs on Fire, it's one of those things when I hear that story being told by somebody else, it kind of gives me a mix of emotions. Like, I'm just like, oh man, those were such great times, because there was like so much excitement and so much passion and so much possibility within that. But of course, it's easy to have some rose-colored glasses on when you're thinking about those times, because there was also so much fear, so much doubt, so much uncertainty, because I had no idea if my great niche within a niche within a niche was even going to matter, or if anybody was going to care. Because, I went to that sandbox reference of like, sometimes there's a reason why nobody's playing in that sandbox,
Right.
because it's quicksand and it will drown you and it will take you down. And there's a reason why sometimes going micro niche really works. And there's sometimes a reason why it doesn't work, because you're not doing the one thing in that book that you referenced, which I published a few years ago now, The Common Path to Uncommon Success, can literally be summed up in one sentence. Become the number one solution to a real problem in this world. If you are able to become the number one solution to a real problem in this world, you are going to win on some level. Sometimes it's massive, sometimes it's just micro, but you're going to win, because people will be the path to the doorstep of the number one solution to their problem, and they're going to ignore the second best solution to eternity. And now here's the problem, is that a lot of people out there are like, well, wait, I had the number one solution. You do, but it's just to a problem. It's not to a problem that people care enough about to elevate you into real success. It has to be a real problem, a real pain point, a real struggle, obstacle, challenge that people are having. And to get to your core of the question, Donovan, is for me, over the years, what have I done? I've just gone to my audience, Fire Nation, and I've said, okay, I built in 2012 a small audience, in 2014 a bigger audience, and in 2016 and so on and so forth. It's grown over time. And I've asked them one simple question. What is your biggest struggle right now? And then they tell me their struggles, and sometimes they're all over the map. But if you record them and you put them in categories and you kind of look at the cream that rises to the top, then I say, okay, here's the top 4 or 5 problems that my audience is having. 2 of them I never want to solve. 1 or 2 of them look kind of difficult. But here's one that I really think I can create a great product or a great service or a great program, community, mastermind, coaching program, whatever it was at that time, to solve that problem. And then I would do that. And that's what we've done over the years. We launched Podcasters Paradise in 2013, which is still today the biggest podcasting course and community in the world. We've done 4 journals now: the Freedom Journal, the Mastery Journal, the Podcast Journal, the 100-Day Goal Journal. I've launched the book, The Common Path to Uncommon Success. We've done many masterminds over the years, both long form and weekends, and both huge numbers and small numbers. I've spoken at events, and we've done all these different things over the years because we said we're going to solve our audience's problems that they're telling us they're having. And that's kind of the evolution of Entrepreneurs on Fire for 11 and a half years, 4,364 episodes, 160 million listens.
What I find really interesting about that is, when you think, at least before I got into podcasting, I just thought it was like, well, you're talking at people, right? Like you're teaching, you're educating, you're empowering. But what I hear you saying is you were listening, right? Like you listen to your audience and their need and then executed on that. So I find that, pretty interesting. Kate, I want to switch gears to you for a second here. I know that you, because I know you a little bit personally, I know that you are like an infrastructure queen, operations queen. Can you tell us a little bit about that side of the business and maybe some tips, tricks for some of our listeners on really how to optimize and be efficient on the operational side?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think to kind of like going off from what John was talking about, like there's lots of products and services and offerings that we've launched. And a lot of the times people ask, like, how do you guys do like all of this? You know, I'm trying to build a team and I'm trying to like launch this product and I'm trying to get my email list grown and my social media. And it's like, I don't get how you did all of it. And that's the thing is like, we never did all of it all at once. It was all like steps, right? So that's a huge part of like how our systems have been built is that we've never tried to come out with two things at once. It's always been one singular focus and like, how are we going to get this working, functioning, on point to where we have the ability to go to the next thing. And I think that a lot of people miss out on building systems because they're trying to do 5 things at once. And that is, you're not going to be serving yourself. You're not going to be serving your community. You're certainly not doing justice to the 5 different things that you're trying to launch all at the same time. So it was always building blocks for us. Like John started the podcast. How do we make the podcasting process as efficient as possible? How is he going to manage a daily interview and be able to get show notes out and be able to, continue booking people on a consistent basis? We figured all of that out before we ever thought about like who's going to be our first sponsor, or how are we going to start a mastermind, or how are we going to start an online course? And so by coming at it like that, to where like we focus on one thing until we have systems built in the back end for it before moving to the next thing, that's how we've been able to build everything that we have. It was never just like pushing everything out there at once. So I think that if more people kind of approach things in their business like that, like how can I make this as efficient and well run as possible? What do I need to delegate? What can I use systems to help me with? What can I use different softwares to help me with? Automation, delegation, and then what do I need to do myself? How can I batch this? Then you get to the point where you start building super efficient systems that will allow you the time to go to the next thing and build the next thing.
Do you feel like those systems have helped you in your new journey of motherhood and being a parent?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now, Bo's just past 3 months and I do get into my email every couple of days, but for the most part, I'm still kind of, I guess you could consider me on maternity leave a little bit. I mean, this is the first podcast interview that I've done since he was born. We've really built like such efficient systems, and I'm able to batch so much of the work that I do that if John can hang out with him for a few hours a day, which he's more than like happy to do and it has done since the day he was born, then I can knock out like plenty of stuff and not be stressed about falling behind or things not going out. So yeah, it's absolutely set us up for success.
So one of the things I love that you guys do that I find very, very interesting that not a lot of businesses would be willing to do for whatever reason is the EO Fire website has always posted all of your revenue, how it's working, what's coming in, what's going out, what are your results. What made you do that, and what have been kind of maybe some of the outcomes or the unexpected results of giving basically your audience, your customers, that kind of transparency into what's going on every day?
I came from a very traditional background. After college, I immediately became an officer in the U.S. Army for 4 years. And, I was a tank officer and I went to Iraq for 13 months. And I was like really in the Army, like the actual Army, like not a peacetime Army. And then after that, I went to law school. I was in corporate finance, commercial real estate. So I had spent the first 32 years of my life on a pretty traditional path, high school, college, career. And it wasn't like I had these great careers or they really worked out, but it was very traditional. And that was kind of my mindset until I kind of started getting opened up to entrepreneurship and the other world that was out there and just business in general and the workings behind it. And it really fascinated me. But, you had this like online marketing and online social media and like online this and online that. And back in 2011, I was kind of scratching my head being like, is this real or is this just a lot of smoke and mirrors? And fortunately, there were a couple people who were either on a monthly or semi-annual basis sharing things that were called these income reports. And I just remember devouring those and saying, wow, this is the first time I feel like I'm really able to prove to myself that these people are running real businesses with real revenue. They're providing real value to real people in exchange for revenue. And it was like a very exciting thing for me to see that this was real. So I remember in that moment saying to myself, if I'm ever able to build a business that is generating real revenue, that's providing real value to real people, that's generating real revenue as a result, I want to do what they're doing. Like I want to share everything, opening up the kimono so that there's other people like myself who are at the beginning parts of their journey who have the same doubts, fears, anxieties that can take comfort from this, that can take inspiration from this, that can learn from this. And so pretty much from day one, I told Kate of my concept that I'm like, hey, if we start making actual money, then let's do this. And she was on board. And obviously it was a weird concept for her as it was for me at the beginning too. But at month 13 in our business, we had our first 6-figure month. And I said, okay, this is the time to start sharing. So we decided to just open up the kimono, bring our lawyer on to share a legal tip, bring our accountant on to share a tax tip, as well as validate the reports because, anybody can say anything online. And so I said, hey, let's take 2 professionals who have zero reason why they would ever stake their reputation on anything like this, because they would never do that. Just so everybody consuming this content can know that, hey, this is real, essentially down to the penny, because we share everything literally down to the penny. And we have now to this day, as we're talking right here, published 125 income reports without missing a month. So that's 125 months in a row of publishing everything financial about our business. And we try to make it, again, very valuable because we want to have our lawyer share a legal tip, our accountants share a tax tip, Kate and I share what's working in our business, what's not working in our business, because we want people to learn from our mistakes, even more in some cases than they can learn from our successes, because they can avoid those mistakes and those missteps. And then we share a little, we share a lot of personal stuff in there too, like about, especially recently with, our travels and our growing family. Like we got Gus, our dog, 4 years ago. Of course, we got Bo 3 months ago, and just kind of taking people on our evolution, on our journey. And it's kind of just like this 1 month check-in of like, hey, you spent 30 days listening to Entrepreneurs on Fire, interviewing entrepreneurs. That's cool. I hope you get a lot of value from that. Here's the 1 day a month where we're going to share Entrepreneurs on Fire, the business, behind the curtain, what's going on professionally, personally, financially, everything along those lines. So we love those reports. And your question of like, what have they opened up? They've just opened up a lot of trust within our community of saying, they're willing to expose themselves, because that's literally what we're doing. Because, there's no risk from doing stuff like this. When you're putting yourself out there in the public, you're opening yourself up to all types of things, both good and bad. So we've just loved being there, being vulnerable with our audience. We've had some unbelievable months of over $400,000 or $500,000. And then we've had some months that were, kind of more scraping the $100,000 mark and, everything in between. So they've seen the ups and the downs. And again, not that $100,000 a month is a down, but, it's the ups and the downs of running a business, because it's all about, not how much money are you making, it's about how much money are you keeping, which is a big thing that we talk about, because that's one of the numbers that we've really been focused in publishing for a number of years now, which is our actual net percentage compared to gross revenue. Because you can make $100,000 and you can spend $125,000, and is negative $25,000 a month a good business? Like, no. Or you can make $60,000 and net $40,000. Now that's a really good business, because you're netting $40,000 a month, even though you're making less than half of that prior example that I gave. And that's what I really want people to think about, because a lot of people get caught up in the bigger, faster, higher game, where the reality is what are you keeping? And that's one reason why we in 2016 moved to Puerto Rico, because we said, hey, this game in our mind is really about keeping the money you make while living the life you want to live. So we didn't want to just grow a bigger team, have more commitments and energy and bandwidth having to be devoted to our business. We wanted lifestyle. We wanted to travel. We wanted to eventually start a family, which we now have. And we wanted time to be able to enjoy all of that, as well as running a thriving business, but not have the stress of like, man, we've got to make more revenue because I got to write this, $600,000 check to the IRS next week, which was a life that we lived when we were back in California. But you move to Puerto Rico, 4% total tax, no state tax, no federal tax, 0% capital gains. You can say, okay, let's take a deep breath. Let's just focus on what's making us money, knowing that we're going to keep the money that we make. Let's make some cool investments that we might not otherwise have been able to make. Some will work, some won't work. But all of that anyways would have just gone to the black hole of the government. And now we get to keep it. Let's get more philanthropic, which we've done. We've done a lot of cool philanthropic things over the years and are continuing to do so here in Puerto Rico and beyond. And let's have fun. And that's kind of the essence of the income reports.
I find it really interesting. A lot of the guests that we've had on the Ethos Effect in their own industries, they're really trailblazers on the transparency front. And it's, we just had Robin O'Brien, who's like exposing all of these misalignments within the food and the climate industry that are literally making us sick. And the correlation to that in our business is we work in healthcare transparency, right? And healthcare financing and the health insurance side. And I just like all of the tidal wave of transparency that's coming. It's at the forefront of our country on so many issues and so many industries. But you guys have been doing this for how many years? Like you're way ahead. And I just,
11.
Yeah. So talk me through some of the aspects of like, when you think of what's next, right? So like you said, you've been doing this a while, but you continue to evolve and listen to your people on what they need. But how do you have time to be that visionary and also put out a podcast every single day? Now being a dad, being a mom, where does the visionary component come in? Do you guys have brainstorming sessions together? How do you do that?
We've definitely had brainstorming sessions for every big decision that we were going to make as a company, as a business, as a couple. And, whether that be when we decided that we were going to launch Podcasters Paradise and then Fire Nation Elite, which was a mastermind that we did, the different events that we've done down here in Puerto Rico, the different products we've done, like the 4 journals that I mentioned, like all of those different big decisions have been huge brainstorming sessions to make sure that is what we wanted to do and what we thought we should do. And, frankly, the past few years, we've kind of just said, hey, we feel like we've built the right size business. We have the right size team. We know what our individual duties are at this point. We're not in growth mode anymore. We're more kind of in maintain mode, which, is a chapter of our life. We might, jump into growth mode in 6 months or, 6 years from now, or we may not. And, it's just one of those things where we wanted to continue to keep our finger on the pulse of what we wanted. And we're continuously talking about that, especially, now when we have little Bo doing a lot of his things and we're spending a lot of time in the same rooms while he's sleeping or feeding or crying or whatever he's doing, we're kind of saying, hey, what do we want? I mean, Bo's going to be, snap our fingers. He's going to be in, preschool and he's going to be doing those things. Like, do we want to start to wind this down? Do we want to sort of wind this up? Do we want to kind of stay in that maintain mode? And I think just that constant communication is critical to make sure you're always on the same page. But just realize that, man, your business, just like your life, is always going to be evolving. So it's not just you're making one decision and then that's it. It's I'm always like, putting my finger on my pulse and saying, how do I feel about where our business is today, about where our relationship is today, about where our overall situation is today, and then making decisions based off of that. And so they're just little micro decisions and micro conversations that kind of just keep our ship in that right direction. So we never have this big veering off course. We might be like heading in the wrong direction for a little bit, but we're talking about it enough and communicating, enough where we're able to course correct pretty quick if that happens.
we love to talk about failures, challenges, and I think it's really interesting talking to like another married couple. Are you guys willing to share like what you do in those difficult moments when maybe Kate wants to do it this way, John wants to do it this way? You know, how do you get through that?
I'll share
Real life
something
example
quick
or conceptual, whatever you want.
Yeah, I'll share something quick, then I'll let Kate take the gist of that answer. But for me, like the reason why Kate and I have always worked really well together is because I'm always like on the side of like pushing too far, and she's always on the side of like pulling back too far. And neither one of those are good alone. It's because that means like on Kate's side of things, like nothing would have ever happened. And on my side of things, only bad things would have eventually happened because I would have just, gone over the edge,
Right.
Multiple times, by just pushing. And so we both are kind of acting like a counteractive magnet to each other, kind of keeping each other within the realm where, Kate's keeping me back from the edge by just being like, that's stupid. And me being like, oh, like that
You're
actually
right.
is stupid. But I never would have realized it by myself. But then me being like, on the other side of the spectrum, like Kate, like if we just did what you're thinking, like we would never do anything. And, we'd both be working 9 to 5 jobs right now. And she's like, oh yeah, that's true. Like that's what we'd be doing. So that's my kind of short thing. And then I'll let Kate take it from here.
Yeah, that is so true. I mean, there's certain like launches and stuff that I can think of where John was just like really wanting to push the limit. And I'm like, you know what, I don't know, like, is it too much? And like probably
it's not even like that
90%.
wishy-washy though. She's not giving herself enough credit. Like she's like, this is why that's a bad idea. Bullet point.
Proof.
And I'm like, that's true.
Yeah.
Keep going.
But then he has really good reasons like why he thinks we should do it. And I would say like 90% of the time, John, I feel like exactly what he said, like both of us are realistic people, right? We hear each other out. We have a conversation about it. Sometimes like it takes a day or two for us to be like, all right, we are not coming to an agreement in this conversation right now. So let's think about it, sleep on it. We'll revisit this tomorrow. And more often than not, we're really willing to meet in the middle and figure something out. In the instances that we are not like aligned on something, we have gone forward with it. And I would say 10 out of 10 times, like it always ends up working really well. Like
9
I
out of 10
remember
times.
when we 9 out of 10. Okay. But I remember when we did the Tony Robbins launch the first year and John was just like, this is like, we have to share this with our audience. This is going to be incredible. Pushing. And we were like in the top 10 of all sales for that. We had an event down here in Puerto Rico for people who bought under our affiliate link. And the feedback that we got from that, the people who like said that their lives were literally changed because of that, how it impacted our lives, getting to spend a week in Fiji with Tony Robbins and 10 other people. Like, those are the times when I was like really uncomfortable and thinking like this is not something that we should do or like in this capacity. And John saying like, no, we've got to do this. And it's that time proved to work out really, really well.
And that's one thing that I actually share on my podcast all the time. So I like to live it is, all the magic happens outside of your comfort zone. So I'm like, Kate, of course it feels uncomfortable because it's outside of your comfort zone. It's outside of my comfort zone too on a lot of levels, which is why I know it's something that we have to pursue because that's where the magic happens. And when the magic doesn't happen outside of your comfort zone, still a lot of lessons happen from that mistake, from that failure. And, we went forward with a genuine heart to serve, to give value. We had no intent for anybody to be harmed by any way, shape, or form. And so if it had not worked out, we could still look in the mirror and say, man, like that didn't work. And I'm disappointed that failed or that didn't succeed to the level that we wanted to. But like we went forward with it with a genuine heart and we wanted it to. So we have nothing to regret. And, it's, to me, that's the main focus of everything when we're pushing. Like, what is your intent? That's key.
Yeah. I was curious from you guys to hear this. Like, so if you have a disagreement, right, and it's about the podcast, it's about the business, whatever, during the day, I've had couples be like, oh yeah, no, we just shut it off. And then we go have dinner and we be with our family and it's like it never happened. And I know, getting a little personal for us, I don't really feel like there is that divide. Like now we're having dinner and we do not talk about the business. That doesn't happen. Like we live, eat, breathe this. But I'm curious now, especially with the newborn, is there a divide? Is it more of an integration? Are you able to shut off those difficult conversations and live a different life? Or is it all one?
I think we just like to shut it down sometimes, to be honest. I think that we like the fact that, hey, basically at 4 p.m. every day, I'm taking my dog Gus for a walk and I'm out there, as the evening is approaching, and I know that we're going to be having a great dinner in like an hour or two. And then we're going to have a nice evening of just relaxing with now Bo, of course, but, beforehand, just like, watching a show or just doing whatever. And I really do feel like we enjoyed not bringing business into that part of the equation. Now, this is 11 and a half years in. I mean, for years 1 through 5, 1 through 7, like whatever it ended up being, like we were eating, breathing and living this. I mean, that's just what we were doing because, we weren't like in survival mode, but we were just in grind mode. We were doing a live webinar every single week for Podcasters Paradise. We were obviously doing the podcast 7 days a week. We had another course called Webinar on Fire. We were doing a webinar for every other week. And then we were maintaining that course. We had a mastermind, Fire Nation Elite. We were doing all these affiliate launches because we had such an active and engaged audience that we were like generating so much revenue from that. And again, we were living in California. So we were like kind of feeling like we needed to do all these things because, half of that was going back to the government every year anyways. So at the end of the year, we're like, man, we worked so hard and we made so much money, but like, where is it all right now? Like, I feel like it's just, after investing in the team and the business and the growth and all these different things and ads and you fill in the blank, you're just like, man, what happened? And that's why it was such a breath of fresh air when we moved to Puerto Rico in 2016 to say, finally, like we can really just do the things we want to do and just focus on our main revenue drivers, like that true 80-20 rule where we kind of shed 80% of things that weren't working. Like we stopped doing the live webinars because they were still doing okay, but they seemed to be trending downwards and they were just taking a lot more time than we need to be putting into it. So we made that evergreen. We shut down Webinar on Fire, the course. We stopped doing all these affiliate launches and we were just kind of focusing on the core of our business. And that really made it enjoyable to kind of focus on that. And then, getting back to, what the emphasis of this question is, allowed us to really say, hey, we're still entrepreneurs and we're still running a very successful multi-7-figure a year business. Like it's going to take time, energy, and effort. And we're going to put that in every single day. But we have the opportunity now to say 4 p.m. comes, 5 p.m. comes. Let's shut our brains down. Let's just relax. Let's take that bandwidth out of our heads and let's enjoy life. Let's enjoy the Puerto Rico evening, dinner, a show. And then the next morning,
Right back
we're going to
out.
talk shop. We're going to talk shop.
So on your podcast, you always ask guests, what business advice do you believe that others might think is controversial? I might have paraphrased that a little bit, but I think that's the general.
You want me to unparaphrase it?
Yeah, please.
Share something that you believe about becoming successful that most people disagree with.
All right. So what do you think? I'm curious to hear your beliefs in that.
I believe most people are scarce. They have a scarcity mindset. They feel like they can't work with their competition. They can't help their competition. They can't create their competition. And to me, that's a whole scarcity mindset where I'm all about abundance. I do believe that we're in this ever expanding, evolving world where you literally can have as big of a piece of a pie as you are willing and wanting to work for. And that goes for everybody across the board. And scarcity is just a losing mindset across.
Love it. Kate?
I'm trying to remember what I answered to this when I was on the podcast, but I don't remember what I answered back then. I think now I would say that like 99% of it's mindset. I really don't. Even today, even though there's so much emphasis on mindset, I still think that people believe that like if they hustle harder or they spend more money on things to, help them or whatever it might be, that like they can be successful. I think vast majority of it is mindset.
And a question that I get a lot when I'm interviewed on other shows is, like, John, you've interviewed over 4,000 successful entrepreneurs. In one word, what sets them apart?
That was my
And to
next
me,
question, John.
you always ask the right questions, Chelsea. You always ask the right questions. And that one word is confidence. And that goes right in with what Kate said. I mean, that's part of the mindset, but they're confident, they're not, overly confident and egotistical about it, but they're confident. They know, I believe in myself. I know that I can create value for other people. I know that I am going to win. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually if I stay the course. It's confidence. It's confidence. And confidence draws people to you as well. If that's one thing you're trying to do is build an audience, people are magnetized towards confidence because they recognize either consciously or subconsciously the importance of confidence. And they're saying, man, like, I don't know if what JLD is saying is true, but it sure sounds like it.
I believe him.
I believe that guy. And that's what I do a lot of coaching. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, not as much as I used to, but I do a lot of group coaching within Podcasters Paradise. Every month we have a live Q&A call, and I do things along those lines. And I do it for other communities as well. I just did a couple days ago for somebody's mastermind, an open Q&A. And I usually just start off by saying, listen, I am going to answer every one of your questions to the best of my abilities. Believe me, I'm wrong a decent percentage of the time, but you're asking me questions. I'm giving you my best answer. It's going to be delivered with confidence. I'm going to be very clear about how I feel. And if that really feels right for you, then I would suggest following my advice. And if it doesn't, I would suggest ignoring it.
Do you receive coaching as much as you give it?
I'm a big believer in both mentorship and being a part of masterminds. And I don't have like an official coach right now or an official mentor. I have a lot of people who I, consider mentors both from afar and in different kind of, text communications that we may be having. We're in some WhatsApp groups, etc. It's one thing that I'm definitely open towards is finding the right person, but I just don't, at this stage, I don't have that next thing that I want to be moving towards. For instance, if I was like, I really want to figure this AI thing out, then I would go find somebody who I really feel like would be the right mentor, coach for artificial intelligence. That's just a random example. It could be anything, but I'm at the point that I kind of mentioned earlier where we know what we're doing. We're in cruise control. We're focusing on family and still running a successful business. But mentorship to me is huge because we're all standing up on the shoulders of giants. I've learned from people before me. Everybody's heard this, listen to my story that back in 2012, I hired Jamie Masters. She was the podcasting guru of The Eventual Millionaire. And I hired her to be my one-on-one mentor. And it was so important. It was so critical to have that type of mentorship and guidance. And I don't know where I'd be without it. And so at different stages in your life, whenever there's a big decision to make, or if there's a big divergence you're taking from your current path, to me, you have to have the right guidance and mentorship for that. So when that happens to me, which it could happen shortly, or it may not, but I will be looking for that when it happens.
What do you think do you guys share an ethos, like collectively, or do you have like your own driving forces that just happen to kind of align and take you in the same direction? That why, that guiding character?
My ethos is really simple. Like, I'm always going back to what I believe is the core message in my book. Create the number one solution to a real problem in this world. That is what I try to do every single day. That's how I live my life. And I know that Entrepreneurs on Fire is the number one solution to a real problem because it's still the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs in the world. So it could be the worst and it could be the best. It's just the only. Again, it's still the only.
Doesn't matter.
We're in our own category.
It's a category of one. And there's actually a great book, by the way, called Category of One from like 7 or 8 years ago. I remember reading it and being like, I was doing that when I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire. I literally created a category of one. And so that's my ethos. I'm always saying, is this what I'm doing now? And also, whenever I'm making a decision, of what I want to be doing potentially in the future, the number one solution to a real problem.
Yeah, I think in terms of like just life wise that, we've always gone back to, and this circles back to the transparency and the income reports and everything. It's like, if we're going to build this business and say that we want to be lifestyle entrepreneurs and have financial and location independence, then we have to like live that, right? We can't just talk it and then be grinding in our business like 24/7. It's not in alignment. And so I've always been huge about like what we practice what we preach. And I think the more that we can show people that, yes, we've built this business. Yes, we've been through hard times. Yes, there have been some months that have been more difficult than others. And yes, we've had some really incredible months. But always we keep our North Star of like, how do we want to be living our lives? Like, we do not want our business running our lives. And so we've been so intentional about, and as John said earlier too, like we have gone down the wrong path before, but because we've always had that vision together, we've been able to like pull ourselves back from that and say, wait a second, what are we doing? Like, we don't want a team of 20 people and we don't want to be at our computers for 10 hours a day. Like, that's not what we want. So, always like reconnecting to what that vision is for how you want to live your life. And then, how can you show other people that to help inspire them to accomplish the same thing? And that's always been like in my heart, because I didn't know what entrepreneurship was when I was younger. When I was in college and working towards, how do I get a degree so that I get a good 9 to 5? And then how do I climb the corporate ladder? Like, that's all I knew. And so for me, finding out about entrepreneurship and now how it's changed my life, and in turn, being able to do that for other people, letting people know, like, you do get to choose. You don't have to do something that you hate. You don't have to be in a business that owns you, like, but you have to make intentional choices to make, what you want to have happen. And I get it. Some people do want to just grind. Like, that's in their nature. That's in their blood. Some people do love 9 to 5, and that's cool too. But you have to be clear and straight up with yourself about what that is for you.
Well, guys, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We look forward to bringing this to our audience, and we hope to see you soon.